oftentimes people don't want to give you a chance. They want to see.
Yes.
they want you to model and go out there and do things with no money and see how you do. And oh, let me see you 2 years, 3 years, and you're like gasping for air. And the other thing is, I think we need a movement to ensure that innovation economies or innovation organizations are led by true innovators and not bureaucratic paper pushers.
Ever wonder what it takes to unlock true Black innovation and wealth creation? You're in the right place.
This is From Chains to Links, where the brightest Black minds, entrepreneurs, academics, creatives, and futurists reimagine what it means to build generational wealth and a thriving Black community.
We're not just talking about change, we're building it. Stick around because this conversation is about to spark something different.
Hello, hello. My name is Ifeoma Ike, and I am one of the co-hosts of your favorite innovation podcast, From Chains to Links. And I am excited about this episode because this is the Baddie Girl Entrepreneur episode. That was a cat. That was a cat sign. But I'm really excited to be joined here by three amazing entrepreneurs, innovator support organizers, and also just like within their own right, change agents that are trying to make sure that none of us get left behind. So I'm gonna make sure I move over to my esteemed panelists, not panelists, conversationalists.
Yes. Bring it.
And why don't y'all? I'm gonna start with Tanya. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for having me. So I'm Dr. LaTanya White, the founder and CEO of Concept Creative Group, where we use these evidence-based frameworks that really push the conversation about Black wealth beyond generational wealth and exposing entrepreneur support organizations, innovator support organizations, and the founders that they serve about these three generations of control of wealth that we need to be embedded into the process. This research has been requested by the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. It's in the congressional record. The Department of Interior is reviewing the research for inclusion in the African American Civil Rights Network because our story and our lives and our identity is just as valuable as any story that we're being told. So I'm excited to talk today.
I mean, so in short, don't play with you.
Right.
don't mess with her. Don't mess with her. Another one not to be messed with. LaKisha. I love the la's. The la la la.
Yes.
LaKisha.
Well, hello everyone. I'm LaKisha Greenwade, founder and CEO of Wearable Tech Ventures. We're a global ecosystem dedicated to the development and promotion of wearable technology, and we support entrepreneurs in 4 continents. And when people say, what's wearable technology? We cover everything from medical technology, sports tech, fashion tech, gaming, VR, etc. So all of that in our ecosystem, and we're working to support and fund 100 wearable tech startups by 2030.
Also not to be played with. And to my left, to probably everyone else's right, Reverend Alisha, please.
Alisha Gordon, you don't have to call me Reverend ever, unless I'm in a pulpit. Alisha Gordon, founder and executive director of The Current Project. We're a nonprofit organization that focuses on the economic mobility of Black single mothers, thinking about how the intersection of data research, policy advocacy, and programming really bring Black single mothers to a place of economic thriving. And so I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with y'all.
So I'm going to be throwing out a lot of Black stuff for the next 15, 20 minutes. And that includes innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when innovation is discussed with us, it's separated and segregated from Blackness. And wanted to just get your thoughts about that. Innovation, Blackness, creation. What do we need to do to like own that, right? And not see it as something separate, right? So I know for me, one thing that I try to remember is that like we have been innovating, and we have also been innovating at times where we were in bondage, right? And just, yeah. So those are just like some of my thoughts. What comes up for y'all? Anybody can jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know when we started, I actually surveyed a number of my friends, professional, non-professional, educated, non-educated, and I said, when you think of Black folks doing great things, what did they do? And I asked that question for a reason, and none of them said inventors. And one of the things that we're doing here at Wearable Tech Ventures is we're developing a new generation of inventors, of investors, of innovators. That's our fabric. That's who we are. So we're taking back that ownership.
That's our fabric. I see wearable ventures.
Mhm.
Okay,
Wearable.
okay. I see it. I see it. Yeah.
I'm really intrigued by your question because in my mind, to be Black is to be innovative. There's no separation between the two. But I do think that the divide between those things are the direct result of us, a lack of remembering and a lack about storytelling. Like, what are the stories that we have told generationally? We hear this all the time about how, Black culture is often talked about from the beginning of slavery, and we're like, child, we were here way before that, right? And so, I mean, I think there's something to be said about how, as entrepreneurs and how, as leaders, that we are always putting that kind of language forward, that the work, that our very being is innovative, right? In this space, in this country, in the work that we're doing, and thinking about innovation as the kind of the reimagining of what it means to be human, what it means to do this work, what is it? Because all of our work is not just about like a bottom line. It's about like, how do we transform the lives of people? How do we transform the lives, and how do we help those people innovate around the issues that are concerning them? And so I really appreciate the question because I hadn't thought about it even being a line of divide, but I can see how it is.
Wait a minute. You remember in Black Panther, Queen Angela, remember who you are. You know what? By the way, that's
Seriously.
wearable technology all in Black Panther too.
No, seriously. And LaTanya, excuse me, want to bring you in because as Alisha was talking about storytelling and you were talking about how some of your work is archived, in these spaces of power and in these spaces of decision making, it feels like that I would love for our stories to just be told and therefore be remembered for generations to come. But there is also something about archiving, right? And being like really intentional about that.
Absolutely. And to your question, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the 150 years ago, the failure of the Freedmen's Bank in 1874. You mean to tell me that these newly freed Black people had $3 million
Isn't that something?
in the 1800s for the federal government to lose? And yet here we are. Like, if that's not resourcefulness and creativity and innovation that needs to be told, right? And needs to be like current generations, the next generation, we need to be informed of the power that our ancestors held to still thrive. And somehow here we are today, even as byproducts of that. And so thinking about storytelling and archiving, we can even get down to when we're talking about wealth transfer and heirs property. If no one in the family knows whose name is on the deed to grandma's house, like, that's a simple story that we can keep telling in our families that's going to keep our wealth out of probate, out of the public court system. And it allows for us to move that wealth down a generational chain in a way that becomes normal, right? And we understand that wealth is a part of our identity and that we don't have to go seeking or being validated because it's being told and held by our own ancestors and elders in the family.
And I'm gonna, I don't know about y'all, but I'm feeling something in my body because I'm struggling a bit. When I hear the word resourcefulness, I also sometimes hear the word resiliency. And there's a power in resiliency because it is a response. And then there is also a struggle with resiliency because I argue that resiliency is not a state that we should be perpetually in all the time.
Lord have mercy.
Agreed.
Would you like to bring the Lord and the mercy in this space? Because what's going on in your body? Because as you're talking, I'm feeling this like, why are they always losing our money? Like, and then we got to rebuild. Why are they always bombing our towns? And then we got to rebuild. And the story that we normalize is the rebuilding. And what we have to be resilient
Right.
through is the original destruction and the
Yes.
bombing and the breakage to begin with, right? And so it's like, I know for me, I can't dwell in that space.
Right.
But there is also something about, like, if we're going to tell a story, are we telling the full story of these cycles, right? Because as we're getting and moving forward towards a more digital entrepreneurial reality, what are the ways that the stories of the ways we were harmed can also be a part of how we build anew, not just participating in the newness of the new thing, right? Because you're reminding us that we have always been a part of the new thing, even when there were chains, right? Always. But there's also been this kind of other side, ugly side of it as well. I don't know.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of and I'm feeling the breathing. And I know you have thoughts on the resiliency thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I think that there is I love what you said about we are not meant to be to remain in a state of resiliency. There's a nervous system reaction that happens that we are constantly in. And so when we talk about, as entrepreneurial leaders, the level of exhaustion just off the bat from just running the business, but also when you're carrying this story and this narrative that is ancestral, that is resilient, that is rebounding, there is a level of molecular, cellular exhaustion that comes with doing this type of work for the reasons for which we do it, right? And so, I mean, I think I'm picking up on the same thing as you, is that, like, how do we, so much of this work is an embodiment of who we are.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally the embodiment of who we are as leaders, as Black folk. And also, how do we begin to kind of measure these things out in a way that begins to reframe and reimagine how we're doing the work, so that we actually can live long enough to see the work, do what it is that it intends to do. Because being in a constant state of resilient and fight and flight and all the time is exhausting and wearing on the body. So, I mean, but what's the happy medium? I don't really have an answer for that, though.
I'm thinking two different things here. One, yes, we have that story of often having to rebuild, but I think in full transparency, we've had scenarios where we've had to rebuild because we weren't supportive of our own selves in certain times, right? And so now we're at a place where awareness and education is incredibly important in us redefining what support looks like for one another, so that constant rebuilding doesn't have to happen. And while you were saying that, I was thinking about Fawn Weaver's story in her new book. This is not a plug, but hey, Fawn. Love and Whiskey, and how she had read a story which happened by accident, because what was supposed to be a PR event with Jack Daniels ended up wrong in the newspaper, but she found it in Singapore and, invested in that and turned it into a brand so that we could all hear the story today. So I share that to say it's important that we're mindful of how we need to continue to uplift one another and continue to reinvest so that the story does not become hidden.
I felt that. And I feel like there's also, thank goodness for God, universe, creator interventions, because, like, these things that end up being to the natural eye seen as mistakes are usually the portals that we take advantage of. That's one thing that I love about, like, being Black, because to Alicia's point, I don't see it as separate from, like, creative or innovative. That is an innovative way to respond to what others would have either missed or just seen as a mistake. So I want us I want to revisit all of y'all childhood for a second. Ooh, I saw all your eyes. And want to hear a little bit. We're all entrepreneurs, and maybe not just as a child, but your pre-entrepreneurial state. What made you know that you were an entrepreneur, or that you were going to pursue that you're an entrepreneur? Feel free to tap into a nice juicy mistake, and or a learning lesson. I don't want to call it failure, but, like, what are some of the parts of your journey that you participated in that you're like, I think of it differently now?
I would love.
Girl, go.
Okay, Mom. And she's heard this before, but when I reflect on my entrepreneurial journey, I literally can pinpoint it to my 13th birthday. So my birthday is January 2nd, right around the holidays. My mom worked at the busiest post office in Miami. And I never spent my birthday with my mom. But on my 13th birthday, I remember, you know, in my infinite teenage wisdom, being so resentful. I was so upset that she wasn't there. And I had this narrative that I would never work somewhere that made me choose between my family and work. And so my thought, the narrative that I had was that my mom was choosing to work. She was single mom, right? She was choosing to not be there with me day to day. And it wasn't until I was today years old as I was conducting this research on the Black wealth experience and really understanding why we got to this place, right? Like how in my family were we at this place? And that was when I learned that she hadn't had a choice, that my grandmother, single mom, raising 9 kids, hadn't had a choice. And her mother before her hadn't had a choice. So while I, on one wavelength, I almost maybe manifested my entrepreneurial journey, because I never did. Even when I was working on campus, I had so much autonomy, right? And so entrepreneurial, but I had said at 13 that I would never work somewhere that made me choose, while at the same time having this resentment towards a fate and a path that my mom had no control over. And so now being deeply humbled, right? And having much more respect for her lived experience and the lived experience of my elders and ancestors that came before her, the way that I engage with my daughter is so much differently. Like I'm here to tell you as a single mom, right? I'm here to tell you, Sparrow, that this is what we are experiencing right now. This is the work that's being done so that you understand the path that you come from, the lineage that you come from, but also your power and your control to change that narrative.
Good.
That is good. I thank you for sharing that and,
Yeah,
and
that was
acknowledging
really
those
good.
feelings as a teenager. I was going to say my entrepreneurial endeavor came when I was the top cookie seller of my brownie troop. And I was only like one or two little Black girls in the troop. So I knew in kindergarten that I had to be wealthy as being the only Black girl in my kindergarten class. And I didn't go to preschool. My grandfather watched me, but I learned to count playing dominoes and playing cards. I had nap time. He told me his nursery rhyme stories that he knew when he was growing up. I had a schedule, and you watch the stories, but I knew when it was Martin Luther King Day. But those experiences, because I didn't have the track of preschool going into kindergarten, I had to recognize what I did bring to the table. And so I think that forced me so that I could have those honors and be that top cookie seller and know that I could shine in those environments where there was nobody like me, where there were no keychains that had my name on it. You know, back then, there was no identity.
Good. No identity. That's good.
Oh,
That I feel like for me, you guys, see this whole like looking at our moms in a different way, or being like getting the opportunity to look at our moms in a different way is like sitting with me. I think a lot of why I went into entrepreneurship, and I've worked in many different places, been working since I was 11, byproduct of just like first generation, reality. But a lot of it was informed by like looking at my mom and feeling like I don't want to be run down like that. Right. And not even fully like appreciating until I was getting older how that literally was like the boat and the vehicle for me to even be here. Like, so Bernice, you a gem. And I was foolish. But I will also say that one of the things that I feel like has been a constant struggle is not not trying to meet my full potential because I was afraid of failure. Like the combination of poverty and also seeing somebody overworked is like, I have all these amazing ideas, but I can't go but too far. It's that Icarus thing. Like if I go too far, I'm going to fall really, really hard towards the ground. There's nobody here to catch me. I'm also the oldest of 5. And so I have to be a model of like things have to work. In some ways, I have to justify these systems that I don't even believe in because I need other people to at least believe that they can work a system to get enough to survive. And banking on I had to have the mindset of like banking on myself first before I started being entrepreneurial. But it also, I think there's also something that I'm reflecting on now that I think I need a little bit more time to think about, that most of us were entrepreneurial. I'll speak for myself. I was entrepreneurial at times when I didn't even say I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think for me, it's also reflecting on like, what are the things that I both enjoyed doing and made money from that didn't even feel like work. And that's also, I think, part of our birthright. But sometimes we don't invest in those spaces because they were called hobbies or they weren't the thing that like was supposed to make us money or make us dignified, right? But those are the things that actually like bring me joy. So I'm finding that more play in my work is actually okay. Yeah.
That's really good. You know, there's one other thing when you talk about this journey and being an entrepreneur and supporting other entrepreneurs, how difficult it can be. I don't think we amplify the real stories when people finally tell them, like your Byron Allen's, how he nearly lost his house 7 or 10 times, and there's other entrepreneurs that nearly went bankrupt multiple times. And if we could equate those stories to what we're going through, we won't feel so bad. Because I feel like we're taught to feel bad if we have one failure, whereas there's some other folks that had multiple opportunities and may have been given multi-million-dollar rounds and given additional chances to fail after they lost that.
I mean, that brings me to this next conversation about how business is becoming so much more complex digitally, but also policy-wise, in a whole range of ways. And you each serve as innovator support organizations. You are supporting people that like part of your business is to make sure other people succeed, right? And so when you think of like the things that are the most missing right now, if you were to think of the 1 or 2 things that you feel like we need this in spades, like we need this without a doubt, right? What are some of the tangible and intangible things? Because I'm going to take one off the table because I know everybody's going to be like, money. So yes, we need money. Are there other things, but in addition to the capital or maybe the ways in which we are getting that money, what are some things that come to your mind through the lens of like you all are seeing entrepreneurs every day grinding, trying to chase or acquire this American dream?
I mean, I'm in the nonprofit space, so our model for acquiring money is much different. We think about philanthropy and all those things. But one of the things that I am learning in our organization is about the role that data plays, especially when you are working with and for and alongside marginalized groups who have a very embedded narrative and story and experience in this country. So much of the philanthropic dollars and philanthropic storytelling is framed by old, antiquated, racist data findings, that, you know, the data not being disaggregated enough to really get to the core of things. And so one of the things that, you know, at our organization, while programming is such a big part, I find that I'm trying to force myself to do more programming because that's where the philanthropic dollars are, right? Which says a lot about, well, if you can produce these particular numbers, if you can show the level of impact, you can often, you know, make folks feel good about the savior complex they have about getting all these Black single mothers out of poverty. And that is the thing in which people want to fund and storytell around. But the fact of the matter is, and when I am getting the courage to really lean into, is the programming is great. There are a lot of organizations who do programming for this particular group, but where is the new, fresh, updated data that shapes and drives the conversations in a 21st century, in a digital age, in a way in which that are connecting the lived experiences of the women that we work with and the people that we serve, and all of the kind of holistic ways in which we want to make sure they get into a place of thriving, that data driving things like policy conversations driving, how other organizations are thinking about how they're spending their philanthropic dollars, how we're talking about particular stories. All of that has to be shaped by a kind of data mining that is really critical to how I think the rest of the 21st century looks like when you're talking about entrepreneurship and innovation, in particular around nonprofit spaces, because in a nonprofit space it's so much about the storytelling, the heartstrings. But I'm like, well, that makes you feel good, but the data says this, right? And so that's something that as an organization that I am finding the courage to really anchor ourselves in and say the data might not be as sexy as the storytelling or the programmatic piece, but it's such a critical part that is that I think is a necessary pivot for us to make sure that we put some real investment in.
Yeah.
Like that. There's two quick things. One, transform the vetting process so that we could get to yes. And
So can you flesh that a little bit? Vetting processes of what? Which vetting
yes.
process?
So oftentimes people don't want to give you a chance. They want to see. They want you to model and go out there and do things with no money and see how you do. And let me see you 2 years, 3 years, and you're like gasping for air. And the other thing is, I think we need a movement to ensure that innovation economies or innovation organizations are led by true innovators and not bureaucratic paper pushers.
Well,
I'd love to kind of to tie in
well, I had to sip, child. Hold on.
All right.
Thanks,
y'all, for the water.
Alicia's point about the data.
Yeah.
So I like to elevate this idea of qualitative data, right? So storytelling,
Yeah.
right? And so new word, if you aren't familiar, word of the day is phenomenology.
I love it.
I love phenomenology.
Phenomenology.
Love it.
The study of the lived experience of a group of people who are, undergoing or participating in some phenomenon. And so the research that I do is the phenomenological study of first generation Black wealth creators, because the story, the narrative, the lived experience has been so far removed, right, from the vetting process, from the evaluation process. I remember I taught entrepreneurship at a HBCU for 11 years, and, rapid prototyping, customer discovery, blue ocean strategy, all the things that literally students would sit in the classroom and I could see their eyes glazing over. Because why, lady? Like, what are you talking about? Where is my story in this thing? How do you want me to go out here and ask 100 strangers to give me feedback on my idea that's very half-baked when culturally, ancestrally, I ain't supposed to step out of this door until it's perfect? And so I had an assignment built into my course. They had to do 3 rounds of rapid prototyping worth 15 points. I had students that would say, I'll just take the B. Willing to give up 15 points from their grade because what are you asking me to do? It don't feel right.
Wow.
I'm not familiar with this. It's too risky. My mama said, right? But when I began to understand that the lived experience of a person, of a group of people informs, or at least it should inform, how we teach, how we train, how we fundraise, how we build, how we innovate, then I had to change everything about the way I was teaching. And ultimately, I had to leave the classroom because the walls were closing in on me. But when we discount the value of the lived experience, we're doing such a disservice to the innovators and communities that we serve.
Yes, that makes a big difference. Like, I think about when I stepped out and didn't have much money, and I come from organizations that are all about excellence, and you have to put something out there and it may not be as polished as you would like. What that does to your own psyche, and then how you have to say, yeah, I really just didn't have it, but I had to do what I could do to get it out there. That's hard.
Yeah.
Do you think that the fear of not only at times failure, but also the fact that there's this pressure for us to be so polished
Mm-hmm.
when we come out. We're in this space where everyone's talking about emergent technology, new technology. So when we think of AI, crypto, blockchain, I'm wondering if there's if I can merge those two, and then the lack of data that we bring to, like, layman's terms, so that everyone can understand how to interpret it and use it in their own lives. If some of that is playing in the divide that we're seeing in both the uptake of some of these technologies, not even just for like communities that are historically marginalized, but for entrepreneurs that have been in the game for a long time, brick and mortar entrepreneurs that aren't necessarily taking on these new technologies. I'm wondering, or I'm offering, that maybe that fear of like, I don't know it well enough, so I'm not going to use it. Just would love to hear some reflections on, like, what are some of the cautions with love that you all would want to share with entrepreneurs that maybe are not weaving these tools into their industries quick enough, which, as we know, these things get updates all the time. So they're also moving as folks need to uptake these things. LaKisha, I see you on the tip of your...
Well, let's just start with this. Let's start with the real. AI is not complete because you don't have all the black data.
Come on.
And people are using it, monetizing it, building products, etc., going to the moon. So if these multimillionaires, billionaires can do it, why can't you?
Agreed. And there's no perfect way to use it. Right.
Get out there and play now.
Yeah.
And to your point about the fear and I'm not good enough, that's such a prime opportunity for this intergenerational transfer of knowledge. We see so many Black-owned businesses not having a successor in place. There's no succession plan in place. It doesn't have to be in the family, although we would love for that to be the case, so we can get towards building this dynasty. But there still should be an exit strategy, an exit plan, some succession planning. And a part of succession planning is the transfer of wealth, the transfer of knowledge, which is a form of wealth. And so if I can, because let me tell y'all something, I'm so tired of learning. I don't want to learn nothing else. Okay. But if I have within my network someone who's work like you lit up, right? And I build the relationship and you get to transfer some of your knowledge into my organization, into my family, my community, then I may not need to be as afraid, but I also don't have to be this new standard bearer, right? I can look to you. I can model what you're doing and accept your knowledge and still be great at the thing that I've been good at for this long.
Absolutely.
That's good. It makes me think about the old Black church adage that says, tell the truth and shame the devil. There's something that you just said and that has come up a couple of times about being the first and the kind of pressure that comes with that, this desire or need to be polished, and how we overthink doing, like I overthink putting a graphic on Instagram that I made myself, and I'm like, oh, it's the
Right.
girl, just right. But when we get to a place where we can tell the truth about these experiences as entrepreneurs, and I mean tell the unadulterated truth, and I love what you said about essentially closing the knowledge gap, because what happens when we tell the truth, we close the knowledge gap for other people to say, oh, that's what it took to do that, or that's how how challenging it was, or actually this is the workaround, this red tape that we often get in. Like, telling the truth not only frees us up, but it closes the knowledge gap for people, because we are in a place in this digital world where things are accelerated. We have to, sometimes do things faster and more progressively and all these things. And the only way that we do that and that we keep up with the progression is to tell the truth to each other about what it takes, what it doesn't take, the things that we're overthinking about. And so that is my offering, is that as we continue to build this work and do this work together, and I think that's why the BIA circle is so powerful, because you have thousands of people who are at your disposal who can tell you the truth about the experience.
Yes.
And not to scare you, not to deter you, but to help you close the knowledge gap and get to where you're going faster.
Ooh,
That part.
ooh. I love this concept of truth being the tool that gets manipulated to make us feel ashamed. But, you know, if I can just dig a little deeper in the church, it's like, you know, your testimony, right, is oftentimes what brings other people through. So getting around the foolery or the veil of thinking it's something to be ashamed of, but as a way to share information is actually a way that Black communities have been innovating and progressing, even when things have been held as barriers. So as we're wrapping up this really amazing, and all of your ancestors are so proud, y'all. Like, ancestors are shining in this space. There are two things. I'm just gonna throw these concepts out there, and I would love for y'all to reflect on it. The one is, like, it's really important for us to remember that innovation is our birthright, right? That we have the right to innovate. And also, secondly, separately but related, when we talk about Black innovation, it would be wrong for anybody that knows me personally to be remiss of the fact that we are all Black femfolk in this space, that we are all Black and not necessarily, we are all equally Black with different experiences. So as you think about, like, not only, I would love to hear your closing thoughts on, like, what comes to your mind when you hear the right to innovate, and also what is unique. What are some things that we should also be both proud of and encouraging of each other as Black femmes that are in this space innovating? And anyone can jump in there.
I'm reminded of this social media post where they had men and women at a baby shower, a bridal shower, and they had to get through a hoop, and the men, they did theirs, and the women did it so much faster. And I think for women, we need to own our power, never minimize ourselves because we think differently. We might think more efficiently because in many cases we are juggling the home, the parents, the children, the work, supporting our mates, etc. And then on the part of innovation, be who you are. That's who we are, innovators.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I'm really big on language, and the phrase you said was the right to innovate. And we often treat innovation like it's a privilege. Like it's something that, ooh, come on. That is something that is bestowed upon you because you come from the right place or the right time or the right family. It is as human a right as water, as housing, as access to food. And so, you know, that really resonates with me and around the language to say a right to innovate. And it is a right that we as Black women, Black femfolk, Black folk from the diaspora, that is embodied in our story and in our divine nature. It is not something that you got to perform for, that you got to get a degree for. You know what I mean? Like that you don't have to continue to learn, right, to do. It is innately our right to innovate around the issues that we're often most concerned about, but also the innovation to be in deeper community with one another. And how do we use the tools at our disposal to make that happen?
Take us home. Take us home.
I would love for us to remember that, you know, as innovators, as entrepreneurs, what we do is solve problems, right? And then what we do beyond that is monetize the solution. So if innovation is our birthright, then let's make sure that we make the connection between wealth and innovation. And then we get to the place where we understand that wealth is our birthright.
That's good.
And so there's no need for us to leave anything else on the table.
That's good.
No crumbs left. No crumbs left.
They ate.
Thank y'all, ladies. Can we clap? I just like clapping. Thank you. We thank you so much for joining us with this conversation. We invite you all to continue the conversation around the right to innovate, but also the right to wealth, the right to community. And we invite you to follow us on our social handles, Build with BIA, and visit our website, blackinnovationalliance.com. Thank you.
Thanks for riding with us on today's journey. If this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend.
Visit FromChangeToLinks.com for more content and make sure to subscribe on our YouTube.
Follow us on Instagram at @BuildWithBIA, and let's keep this movement growing.
The road to true Black prosperity is built together, and we need you to do it.